Colorado's offense is a no-show in Lincoln as Colorado loses big. Injuries starting to pile up after the game. What does it mean as we enter CSU week? Plus recruiting updates and an interview with a surprise recruit, and so much more coming at you next.
Give me my theme music!
What's up, Buffs Nation, and welcome to Buffs News Weekly, your weekly source for all Colorado football news. I am your host, Russ Dornish. Make sure to like and subscribe on our journey to 2,000 subscribers. For now, let's get on to the news. Of course, the big news is the terrible loss that Colorado suffered at the hands of the Huskers in Lincoln. We will have a full in-depth breakdown this Wednesday on the Buff Blitz with David Talks Buffs, but I of course wanted to give some initial thoughts and things to look at from the game. If you tuned into our preview this past week, we said that our defense would be key to victory, and them being able to hold Nebraska to under 30 could lead to a victory. I even predicted the score at 34-28 with Colorado winning. Well, the defense did show up, and they held Nebraska to 28 points, technically 21 points if you don't include the pick six that the offense gave up on their side of the ball. But that is where things went really wrong. The Buffs offense failed to show up whatsoever from the start, with everything that could go wrong going wrong. From drops by receivers to Colorado abandoning the run from the get-go. Not only that, but Nebraska's front four dominated the line of scrimmage from the moment the first whistle until the final one, sacking Shedeur 6 times, but also having pressure on nearly every single snap. I want to give props to Nebraska's defense as they looked like a top 10 defense for sure, especially on their defensive line. Not really blitzing as much as just beating with the initial 4 or 5 rushers on their line. Now, Travis Hunter still led the team in receiving with a quiet 110 yards, and he also played well on defense too. Speaking of the defense, as I stated, the defense did what they needed to do from start to finish, holding Nebraska to only 3 of 12 on third downs for the game. The best third down percentage that a defense has held a team to since Prime took over. Probably the biggest talking point for fans after the game was the play calling, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Colorado failed on 2 fourth and short plays, running the ball into a sea of red out of the shotgun, and the biggest head scratcher of the night was running a hitch route on the furthest side of the field while the line of scrimmage was on the 2-yard line. This led to a pick six that gave Nebraska a 14-0 lead in the first 10 minutes of the game, and Nebraska never looked back after that. The players that should be highlighted for positive nights, as there were a few, especially on the defensive side, were Cam Silman-Craig, who led the team in tackles with 11, including 3 for a loss, and DJ McKinney, who had a number of big plays and led the way with 2 passes defended, as well as the second most tackles for the team. Colorado ended the game with no official sacks, but 7 total tackles for a loss. Any way you look, it was a bad loss, and now Colorado plays in Fort Collins in what will need to be a bounce-back game for the offense and a continuation of the improvements that we've seen from the defense. Now, for the injury report coming out of the game, Shiloh Sanders left in the first series of the game with an apparent arm injury. The first report said a broken forearm, as Prime had stated that at halftime, but in the after-game press conference, there was optimism that he could be back sooner. Chidozie Nwankwo was in a sling post-game and left the game early in what was announced as an AC joint injury, and they said it does not look serious, but they'll know more this week. Lastly, Shedeur Sanders left the game early after taking a helmet-to-helmet hit that was called targeting and most likely left as a precaution with the game well out of hand. Colorado now looks to CSU next weekend, who themselves are dealing with injuries as their star receiver Torrey Horton left their game against Northern Colorado and did not return. His status for Saturday has not yet been announced, so we don't know if he will be playing or not, but that is something to keep an eye on as we move through this week and on to the CSU game. Now, moving on to some recruiting news outside of the game, let's just move past that for now. Colorado has offered a number of already committed players in recent months. Colorado offered 3-star commit Julian Horton out of Maryland, a 3-star safety athlete who was committed to North Carolina since June. The late offer says that Colorado believes there is a chance at a flip, so we will see what happens with visits this fall and whether they can get Horton on campus. Horton wasn't the only commit receiving a late offer this past week from Colorado. Colorado also offered UCF commit Christian Hudson, a 3-star defensive lineman out of Florida. Hudson has also shown playmaking ability on both sides of the ball, and Colorado does hope to sway him and bring him in for the 2025 class. Now, in some other surprising news that was very interesting when it dropped this week, but after having Antoine Hill Jr. on his podcast, Shedeur Sanders and Deion Sanders Jr. hosted Colorado recruiting target Julian Lewis on their podcast. Now, the interview was a little awkward as it definitely seemed all parties were trying not to say too much, with Lewis being one of Colorado's targets to replace Shedeur after this season. One exchange included both Sanders talking about Lewis joining family vacations and what many could perceive as an if you commit type of move.
Yeah.
No bad.
You just got to be a part of it one time, bro. You understand, you understand, bro.
Yeah, I don't get invited to the private Sanders trips, so I'm not there yet.
Bro,
I'm not there yet.
You're part of the fam, bro.
I'm not there yet. Not there yet.
You part of the fam, man. Jeffrey messes you, bro. You know, I pulled him in.
Jeffrey, bro. My guy.
Still no word from Lewis on a full shutdown of his recruiting, and no word from USC on their plans if Longstreet becomes their target or if they've moved on from Lewis at all. We just have not heard anything at this point, and for now it's just a wait and see game that will most likely go until signing day this December. Either way, it seems Lewis is still in play though for Colorado, with the interview on this podcast kind of hinting at that. But we, again, will keep track and see what happens over the course of the season. When all is said and done, with all the recruitment, how Colorado finishes this season will have a huge impact, and this last weekend's game does not help their goals in recruiting. Colorado needs to improve drastically if they want to get more recruits for future seasons. Now, if you watched games this past week, the one caveat and kind of positive to the weekend was the Big 12 as a whole actually looked pretty poor. Several Big 12 teams barely pulled out victories against much lesser opponents, and even the teams that are even much better have had issues, such as Utah, who should run away with the conference, having yet again to deal with injuries to their star quarterback Cam Rising. For now, the Big 12 is completely wide open, and while the non-conference loss to Nebraska is going to hurt, and especially hurts us Colorado fans, Colorado's still in it and has a chance to turn things around if they can improve. It is week 2 after all. But like so many others, I do understand that it is a little bit of a panic button push now because of how poor we played. Let's see what happens this week. I think the CSU game is going to be a very, very important bounce back step for Colorado to see if they learn from their mistakes this past weekend. For now, it's Sheep Rivalry Week as Colorado heads to Fort Collins for a crucial bounce back game for the Buffaloes. Tune in this Wednesday night for the Buff Blitz as we close the chapter on this weekend's game and move on to preview the rivalry matchup with CSU. See you all Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. That's all for this week. Thank you for tuning in once again. We appreciate you all so very much for allowing me to do this on a weekly basis. No matter how bad of a week we may have, Buffs fans, we've been through worse, and we'll get through this together as long as we continue to support our team. For Buffs News Weekly, I'm Russ Dornish. Go Buffs!
Give me my theme music!